Sub-Zero is one of the most iconic characters in all of fighting games. Over 30 years of lore, two brothers, multiple transformations, and an identity that's been stolen, corrupted, and reborn more times than any character deserves. Today, I'm breaking down the entire timeline of Sub-Zero from beginning to end. And it all starts with the man who wore the mask first and lost it the fastest, Bai Yi Shan, the original Sub-Zero. Here's something most people don't think about. The character who launched one of the most legendary legacies in fighting game history was dead after one game. 1. Bi-Han debuted in the original 1992 Mortal Kombat as a cold, ruthless assassin serving the Lin Kuei clan, and from the moment players selected him, he felt different. His signature freeze move could stop an opponent mid-attack, locking them in place while you punished them for free. Nobody else on the roster played like that. He wasn't just a ninja with a color swap. He was mechanically unique in a game where most characters shared the same basic toolkit, but what made Bi-Han truly special wasn't his moveset. It was his identity. He was designed as the polar opposite of Scorpion. Where Scorpion burned with vengeance and fury, Bi-Han felt nothing. Zero remorse, zero hesitation. He killed because the Lin Kuei told him to kill, and that was enough. No tragic backstory driving him forward. No moral crisis weighing him down. Just a professional doing professional work. And that's exactly what made his impact so massive. In a single game, Bi-Han established the entire Sub-Zero archetype. The ice powers, the blue palette, the masked assassin identity, the rivalry with Scorpion. Every single element that would define this character for the next 3 decades came from a man who didn't even survive to see the sequel. Fans still argue to this day whether that original cold-blooded killer concept was the purest version of Sub-Zero, the one that got it right before anyone tried to soften it. But whether you prefer the emotionless assassin or the hero that came after, one thing is undeniable. Bi-Han built the foundation, and then the franchise killed him for it. The death of Bi-Han and birth of Noob Saibot. One murder changed everything. Not just for Bi-Han, not just for Scorpion, but for the entire Mortal Kombat franchise. When Scorpion killed Bi-Han during the original tournament, it wasn't just revenge, it was the first domino in a 30-year narrative avalanche that's still going. Here's what happened. Scorpion, burning with rage over the death of his family, hunted Bi-Han down during the tournament and killed him in cold blood. Direct, brutal, final. But death in Mortal Kombat is never really final. Bi-Han's corpse was dragged into the Netherrealm, where the darkest magic in existence began working on, corrupting him, reshaping him, erasing everything he was. The Netherrealm didn't just resurrect Bi-Han, it inverted him. His cryomancer powers, the ice abilities that defined him, were completely stripped away and replaced with shadow-based attacks and portal manipulation. Think about that for a second. He went from cold to dark, from ice to shadow, from Sub-Zero to something with zero humanity left. That something was Noob Saibot. Now, quick fun fact before we get back to the heavy stuff. Noob Saibot is literally just Boon and Tobias spelled backwards, a reference to creators Ed Boon and John Tobias. He first showed up as a hidden, unplayable character in Mortal Kombat 2 back in 1993. Whether that name is clever fan service or a lore-breaking Easter egg depends entirely on who you ask, but either way, it stuck. Here's where it gets philosophical though. Is Noob Saibot actually Bi-Han, or is Bi-Han gone entirely, replaced by something wearing his corpse? The Netherrealm didn't just change his powers, it stripped his identity, his loyalties, his humanity. Some fans argue there's still a fragment of the original Sub-Zero buried in there. Others say the Bi-Han who served the Lin Kuei died on that tournament floor and never came back. There's no clean answer, and honestly, that ambiguity is what makes the character so compelling. But here's the thing that matters most. Without this single death, Kuai Liang never inherits the Sub-Zero title. Noob Saibot never exists. The franchise's most complex character arc never begins. Every single thing that follows traces back to Scorpion's blade. And speaking of what follows, Bi-Han's younger brother wasn't about to let the Sub-Zero name die with him. Gakuai's Ai Lianqin and corrects. Mortal Kombat 2 drops in 1993, and there's a new Sub-Zero on the character select screen. Same mask, same ice powers, same clan. But this is not the same person. This is Kuai Liang, Bi-Han's younger brother, and the guy who would go on to become the Sub-Zero that 90% of fans actually grew up. Here's the thing about Kuai Liang. He inherited everything from his brother. The title, the cryomancer abilities, the Lin Kuei expectations. But he didn't inherit the blind obedience, and that one difference changed literally everything. Bihan was a weapon. Point him at a target, he kills it. No questions asked. Kuai Liang looked at that same system and said no. Not eventually, not after some long soul-searching arc across 5 games. Almost immediately. By Mortal Kombat 3, just 2 years later, this guy had already broken from assassin tradition entirely. While the Lin Kuei wanted him running contracts and serving criminal interests, Kuai Liang was actively fighting alongside Earthrealm's defenders against Shao Kahn's outworld invasion. Think about how fast that shift happened. He goes from inheriting his dead brother's assassin mantle to becoming a reluctant hero in the span of 1 game. Same starting point as Bihan, same powers, same training, same clan, completely different soul, and that's not an accident. His defining trait was never his ice abilities or his combat skill. It was refusal. Refusal to be a puppet. Refusal to let the Lin Kuei dictate his moral code. Refusal to become another version of his brother. Every major decision Kuai Liang makes from this point forward comes back to that single characteristic, and it's what separates him from every other ninja in the franchise. Now, fans love this version of Sub-Zero. He's the definitive one for most people, but there's always been a quiet debate in the community about whether Kuai Liang's arc sanitized the character. Bihan was genuinely dangerous, cold, ruthless, unpredictable. Kuai Liang turned Sub-Zero into something closer to a conventional hero, and some longtime players feel like something got lost in that transition. It's a debate that's never fully settled, but whether you prefer the assassin or the hero, one thing is certain. Kuai Liang's refusal to be controlled was about to be tested in the worst possible way, because the Lin Kuei had plans for him that would strip away everything, including his humanity. The Cyber Initiative, your own clan, not an enemy, not a demon from the Netherrealm, not some interdimensional warlord. Your own people decided you were a problem, and their solution was to cut you open and replace you with machine parts. The Lin Kuei Grandmaster launched what he called the Cyber Initiative, a mandatory cybernetic assimilation program designed to convert living assassins into obedient machine warriors. The logic was cold and clinical. Emotions create weakness, free will creates disobedience, and Kuai Liang's growing heroism made him the biggest liability in the entire clan. So they strapped him down and took roughly 60% of his organic body away. Bones replaced with alloy, muscle replaced with hydraulics, identity replaced with programming. And here's the thing, the conversion didn't just swap out flesh for metal. It attempted to preserve his cryomancer abilities within a technological framework, meaning the ice power survived, but everything behind them didn't. The spiritual discipline, the martial philosophy, the decades of Lin Kuei training that gave those abilities meaning and depth, all of it was stripped clean. What remained was a weapon that could freeze things. Ice powers without the soul behind them. A shell wearing Sub-Zero's face that had zero connection to the man who earned that name. Cyber Sub-Zero appeared as a playable and story-central character in Mortal Kombat 9, and the narrative didn't sugarcoat what happened. This wasn't a power-up. This wasn't an evolution. This was a man who dared to become a hero being punished for it by the people who raised him. The Lin Kuei looked at Kuai Liang's growing conscience and decided the fix was to remove the conscience entirely. But here's where it gets interesting. The fans agreed with the tragedy, not in a this is compelling storytelling way, but in a we actively dislike this version of the character way. Cyber Sub-Zero is broadly viewed as Kuai Liang's absolute lowest point, visually less compelling than his human form, narratively regressive because it undid his agency and identity in a single procedure. The character was conspicuously absent from promotional materials in later games, which tells you everything about how even the developers eventually read the room. And that's what makes this era so fascinating. It's the franchise asking the question out loud. What happens when you remove everything that makes Kuai Liang who he is? The answer wasn't a stronger warrior, it was a tragedy. A hollow machine wearing a dead man's powers. But if forced conversion into a cyborg sounds like rock bottom, Kuai Liang wasn't done suffering, not even close. Revenant Sub-Zero. Let's count the ways the universe has destroyed Kuai Liang. Forced into the Lin Kuei as a child. Forced into a machine against his will. And now, forced into undeath by a sorcerer who collects souls like trophies. This is the darkest chapter in Sub-Zero's story, and it's not even close. During the events of Mortal Kombat 9, in the midst of the Outworld invasion, Kuai Liang was killed by Sindel. That alone would be tragic enough. A warrior who fought relentlessly for Earthrealm, cut down during a battle he never should have lost. But death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far worse. Quan Chi, the Netherrealm sorcerer, claimed Kuai Liang's Liang's soul and resurrected him as a revenant, an undead warrior ripped from whatever peace death might have offered, and bound to serve the Netherrealm's will. Not asked, not volunteered, enslaved. The same sorcerer who had been manipulating Scorpion, who had been pulling strings behind nearly every tragedy in the franchise, now had Sub-Zero on a leash. Let that sink in for a second. Kuai Liang didn't just get ambushed by an outworld warrior. He got his soul stolen by a man who turns the dead into weapons. And by the time Mortal Kombat X picks up roughly 25 years later, Kuai Liang has spent decades as a revenant, serving forces that stand against everything he ever fought for. As a revenant, Kuai Liang's cryomancer abilities remained intact, but became corrupted with necrotic energy. His ice magic, once clean and precise, now carried a death-infused spectral quality, darkened, twisted, wrong. His physical appearance matched the corruption, skeletal features, and ethereal glow, tattered remnants of the warrior he used to be. He looked nothing like Sub-Zero, because he wasn't Sub-Zero anymore. He was a tool, and that's the part that cuts deepest. As a revenant, Kuai Liang had zero agency, no will, no identity, no choice. Just servitude to a sorcerer who saw him as nothing more than a useful corpse. This is the third time someone forcibly transformed him into something he never chose to be. And unlike the Lin Kuei's cyber initiative, there was no body left to reclaim. Just a soul in chains. The fan reaction was visceral. Seeing Sub-Zero, one of the franchise's most iconic heroes, reduced to a mindless servant of the Netherrealm, hit hard, especially because it wasn't just him. Quan Chi claimed multiple Earthrealm warriors the same way, but something about seeing Kuai Liang corrupted after everything he'd already survived felt uniquely cruel. The debate still rages about whether this was bold, earned storytelling that showed the cost of war, or just grimdark excess that piled suffering onto a character who'd already had enough. Honestly, both sides have a point, but regardless of where you land on that argument, the emotional reality is undeniable. Kuai Liang gave everything for Earthrealm and got his soul stolen as a reward. But if you think this is where his story ends, buried under betrayal and undeath, you clearly don't know Kuai Liang, because what he does next doesn't just redeem. It redefines the entire Lin Kuei, Grandmaster of the Lin Kuei. For the first time in his entire existence, Kuai Liang wasn't surviving, he was building. After clawing his way back from the Revenant nightmare and reclaiming his own mind, Kuai Liang did something nobody expected. He didn't just return to the Lin Kuei, he took it over. And then he burned its entire legacy to the ground and rebuilt it from scratch. Let me explain what that actually means. The Lin Kuei had operated as a criminal assassination syndicate for generations. Decades of contract kills, forced cybernetic conversions, selling their warriors' bodies and souls to the highest bidder. This was an institution built on blood money and obedience. And Kuai Liang walked in, assumed the title of Grandmaster, and dismantled every single one of those operations. No more assassination contracts, no more selling loyalty. The Lin Kuei would be an honorable martial arts institution focused on discipline, mentorship, and protecting Earthrealm, period. This was historic, literally the first time in the entire franchise that the Lin Kuei operated under a protagonist's moral authority. Every previous leader had been corrupt, power-hungry, or outright villainous. Kuai Liang implemented new ethical codes for membership, restructured training around philosophy and self-mastery rather than killing efficiency, and personally mentored younger fighters under the reform system. And here's the full circle moment that makes this land so hard. His brother Bihan served a corrupt Lin Kuei without question. He was their weapon, their obedient killer. Kuai Liang didn't just refuse to serve the corruption. He led the entire clan away from it. Where Bihan was controlled by the system, Kuai Liang became the system, and he made it something worth following. That's not just character growth. That's a complete identity inversion across 2 generations of the same bloodline. But here's where it gets complicated. Not everyone bought in. Frost, one of Kuai Liang's most promising students, became the crack in the foundation. She was talented, ambitious, and absolutely convinced she deserved more than the reformed Lin Kuei was offering. Her insubordination wasn't just teenage rebellion. It raised a genuinely uncomfortable question. Could the Lin Kuei actually sustain this transformation? Or were the old patterns of control, defection, and power hunger too deeply embedded in the clan's DNA to ever truly purge? Frost eventually betrayed Kuai Liang entirely, proving that reforming an institution institution doesn't mean reforming every person inside it. The culture of the old Lin Kuei still lived in her ambition, her entitlement, her willingness to burn everything down for personal power. She was a living reminder that the clan's brutal history doesn't just disappear because the guy at the top changed the rules. Fans largely viewed this era as Kuai Liang's earned redemptive endpoint. The assassin who became a slave, who became a machine, who became a corpse, was now a leader, a teacher, and a force for genuine good. Some felt the transformation happened too cleanly, that decades of institutional evil shouldn't resolve through one man's willpower alone, and that's a fair criticism. But the Frost subplot added exactly the kind of texture that kept it from feeling like a fairy tale. For the first time, Kuai Liang had power over his own story, but power and mastery are two very different things. The Titan era. For the first time in his entire existence, Kuai Liang had nothing holding him back. Let that sink in. Every single era before this one came with an asterisk. He was an assassin under orders. He was a cyborg stripped of his humanity. He was a revenant enslaved by the god he fought to protect. He was a grandmaster still cleaning up the Lin Kuei's centuries of corruption. There was always something chaining him down, always some force trying to erase who he actually was. But in Mortal Kombat 11's timeline, those chains were finally gone. This version of Kuai Liang operated at absolute full capacity. His cryomancer abilities reached levels the franchise had never shown before. We're talking absolute zero attacks, full environmental ice manipulation, the ability to reshape entire battlefields into frozen wastelands with sheer willpower. Every technique his lineage had passed down for generations, he mastered. Every limitation previous versions struggled with, he overcame. This wasn't a fighter surviving his circumstances. This was a fighter thriving beyond them, and his power wasn't just martial. That's what made this era different from everything before it. Kuai Liang simultaneously held every role the franchise had ever given him, and then some. He was still a warrior on the front lines. He was still the Grand Master of a reformed Lin Kuei, but now he was also a mentor to younger fighters coming up through the ranks, and a diplomatic liaison between Earthrealm's defenders and the mystical realms that had spent decades trying to destroy it. No previous version of Sub-Zero held all of those roles at the same time. Not one. Here's the thing. The Titan era wasn't just a power upgrade. It was the emotional payoff for every dark chapter that came before it. The boy who was forced to kill became the man who chose to protect. The assassin who refused orders became the leader who wrote new ones. The hero who kept getting his identity stripped away over and over and over finally stood as a complete, liberated person operating at full spiritual and martial capacity. Unowned by anyone. Fans recognized it immediately. This was the definitive Kuai Liang, the version where everything clicked, the sweet spot. Now, some players raised a fair point. When your protagonist reaches god-tier power levels, where do the stakes go? If Kuai Liang can freeze entire environments and outclass most of the roster, what's left to challenge him? It's a valid tension. Peak power can sometimes mean reduced drama, but honestly, after watching this character tortured, converted, killed, enslaved, and betrayed across 30 years of canon, most of the community felt he earned this. Every bit of it. The man deserved to stand at the top without someone trying to tear him back down. And that contrast is the entire point of his story. From a Lin Kuei enforcer following orders he didn't believe in, to the most powerful and complete version of himself, answering to nobody. It was the perfect ending to his arc, which is exactly why what came next hit so hard. Because the new era didn't just reset the timeline, it brought back the one person Kuai Liang never expected to face again, his brother. New era, Bi-Han's return. Let me put this in perspective. Bi-Han, the original Sub-Zero, the character who started everything back in 1992, was dead. Not missing from a few games dead, not mentioned in a flashback dead, gone. For 31 years of real-world time, and over 17 years of in-game canon, Bi-Han existed only as a corrupted wraith or a name in someone else's backstory. He was a footnote in his own legacy. Then Mortal Kombat 1 dropped in 2023, and NetherRealm said something nobody expected. We're bringing him back, for real this time. And they didn't just bring him back as a cameo or a nostalgia grab. The new era Bi-Han is a fully realized character with genuine moral complexity, independent motivations, and an actual arc. He's not not blindly serving the Lin Kuei. He's not a puppet for Outworld. He's carving his own path, making his own choices, operating with the kind of agency he never had in the original timeline. The cold, one-dimensional assassin from 1992, gone, replaced by someone you actually have to think about. Here's where it gets complicated. For 3 decades, Kuai Liang owned the Sub-Zero identity. He earned it. He fought for it. He transformed it from an assassin's code name into a symbol of redemption and leadership. Every iconic Sub-Zero moment from MK2 onward belonged to the younger brother. Bi-Han was Noob Saibot. Bi-Han was the dead guy. Bi-Han was the cautionary tale that made Kuai Liang's journey meaningful. And now suddenly, the franchise looked at that 30-year narrative imbalance and said, actually, let's try again. For the first time in Mortal Kombat history, both brothers stand on equal narrative footing. Not one as the hero and the other as a shadow. Not one carrying the mantle while the other rots in the Netherrealm. 2 fully developed characters, both with legitimate claims to the Sub-Zero name, both demanding the audience's attention. The fan response was exactly what you'd expect. Electric, and completely split down the middle. One camp celebrated. Finally, Bi-Han gets the treatment he deserved from the start. Finally, the original Sub-Zero is more than a stepping stone for his brother's story. The character who launched an entire franchise archetype gets to actually exist as a person rather than a corpse. The other camp pushed back hard. Kuai Liang spent decades earning his place as the definitive Sub-Zero. Every sacrifice, every transformation, every moment of growth built toward his legacy. Resurrecting Bi-Han and giving him equal standing doesn't just add a character. It potentially undermines everything Kuai Liang fought for. And honestly, both sides have a point. That tension is exactly what makes the new era so fascinating. The question that the original timeline answered definitively back in 1993, which Brother Ai's Sub-Zero, got deliberately reopened. NetherRealm looked at their oldest narrative decision and chose to make it a question again. Which brother defines the legacy going forward? Which one earns the mantle this time around? Nobody knows. And that uncertainty has fueled more debate than almost any other storyline in recent franchise history. But Bi-Han's return was only half the equation. Because while the older brother was reclaiming his identity, Kuai Liang was about to do something even more radical than inheriting a title. He was going to build something entirely new. New? Iare, the founding of the Shirai Ryu. Think about everything that's been done to this man. The Lin Kuei took a child and turned him into a killer. The Cyber Initiative took a warrior and turned him into a machine. Quan Chi took a hero and turned him into a puppet. Then that same sorcerer turned a defender into a revenant. Every single era of Kuai Liang's life was defined by someone else deciding what he would become. Someone else's agenda, someone else's vision, someone else's war. And then he did something nobody expected. He stopped fighting for other people's institutions and built his own. In the new era's canonical timeline, Kuai Liang doesn't just leave the Lin Kuei. He doesn't reform it. He doesn't try to fix centuries of corruption from the inside. He walks away entirely and founds the Shirai Ryu from nothing. A completely new martial arts faction built on one principle: the explicit rejection of everything the Lin Kuei ever stood for. No assassination contracts, no killing for hire, no blind obedience to a grandmaster's orders. The Shirai Ryu operates under a strict moral code that positions honorable combat and righteous purpose above profit, tradition, and power. It is, in every possible way, the philosophical opposite of the clan that raised him. And here's why that matters more than any fight he's ever won. Kuai Liang didn't inherit the Shirai Ryu. He wasn't appointed to lead it. Nobody forced this identity onto him. For the first time in his entire story, across every timeline and every game, this is something that is entirely and only his. Not his brother's legacy, not Raiden's mission, not the Lin Kuei's mandate. His values, his rules, his creation. The Shirai Ryu now competes directly with the Lin Kuei for martial authority within Earthrealm. 2 factions, 2 philosophies. The old way versus the new. Traditional assassination clan doctrine against a progressive combat ethic that Kuai Liang spent literally decades developing through suffering, betrayal, and survival. That institutional rivalry isn't just a plot device. It's the physical manifestation of every internal conflict Kuai Liang ever faced, turned into something real. The community sees this for exactly what it is. Not a redemption arc. Redemption implies he was a villain who needed saving. This is something more ambitious. This is a man who was broken, rebuilt, broken again, rebuilt again, controlled, corrupted, enslaved, freed, and after all of it, chose to create something entirely new rather than settle for repairing something old. That's not redemption, that's vision. But the story isn't finished, because Bi-Han is back. The original Sub-Zero, restored and reimagined in the new era with complexity he never had before. And the question that now hangs over the entire franchise is one that over 30 years of Mortal Kombat has been building toward. Which brother defines the future of Sub-Zero? Bi-Han, the original, reclaiming the name he held first, or Kuai Liang, the successor who turned that name into something worth carrying? The Lin Kuei's assassin, the Lin Kuei's cyborg, Quan Chi's revenant, the Lin Kuei's grandmaster, the Shirai Ryu's founder. Every identity, every transformation, every forced evolution across 3 decades of games, all leading to this single unresolved tension between two brothers and the legacy they both claim. That's where Sub-Zero stands in 2024, and honestly, it's the most compelling place he's ever been. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.